Hey, everybody, welcome to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. And thanks for joining us if you're joining us via YouTube as well. So listen, everybody, I really appreciate that you've enjoyed the last couple of weeks of encore performances. And the reason why you've been listening to them is because my precious Bobby Wilson, who many of you have known as interrupting us many times during these broadcasts and through the radio program and television program, Bobby's bark has been absolutely so much a part of these conversations. Kevin is still with us. However, Bobby has passed over Rainbow Bridge. To honor my fabulous Jack Russell, who I have to say still keeps me in tear mode, I am bringing our first guest, or our guest for today, who is Sharon Speevak. And Sharon is with Elder Dogs Canada, when we have a branch here in Nanaimo. Sharon is going to tell us all about it, and let's walk ahead. Hello, Sharon. Welcome to the program. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Well, it's a privilege to be here at any time, but especially just honoring Bobby Wilson and your relationship.
Dogs get under our skin. Yeah. And even in the beginning of this recording, it's been today at the time of recording, she will have passed away at 5:15 this afternoon, 3 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's, even though it's been a little bit of time, just speaking of her, you can hear it in my voice. It's still so fresh. What is it about people and their dogs? Or animals all over, not just dogs, but animals as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I think dogs are pretty special, but pets in general, and certainly, so much has been written about just the uniqueness of that bond. But, I think they touch a part of our soul that no other relationship really can trigger. It's just somebody who hasn't experienced that. I think there really is a part of them that isn't awake to that level of unconditional love and loyalty, just phenomenal loyalty. And that's not to diminish other kinds of love in our life, love of a spouse, love of a mother, love of a child. But I think there is something very unique about the love that we experience around our pets, and in particular canine, dogs.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere in many of the condolences that I have received in this last few weeks, one of my favorites had to do with, dogs being angels on earth. They're sent without their wings to be by our side in such a way. Elder Dogs is an organization that really does support older adults to stay in their homes and have supports to look after their animals. Can you tell us a little bit about what Elder Dogs is and does?
Well, Elder Dog is a nonprofit organization, and it's nationwide. So it's called Elder Dog Canada, but of course it has branches all over. There's actually branches in 8 provinces, and there's been one here in Nanaimo since May of 2020. And Elder Dogs is a nonprofit organization whose volunteers are just dedicated to making sure that the bond between seniors and their pets can continue in the future, can remain, a loving family within the home. And they do that by supporting seniors and providing assistance with whatever they need in order to continue to take care of their dog. So whether it's assistance walking the dog, picking up pet food, transporting the dog to the vet, temporary foster care if the owner has to go into hospital, any service that's required, we will provide it with a view to just maintaining the family together.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really noticed with Kevin is that and I wonder whether or not this is a great application, like from a firsthand experience of the loss of Bobby Wilson and this last 3 weeks. I can no longer leave Kevin alone at all. I mean, she's always been with her sister. So when I was going out to work, and I work, but I work from home now due to COVID. But I mean, I can't even imagine now being able to go back to work in the office, because she has always had her sister or had someone around her. You know, I remember last year, Bobby Wilson had stepped on something and she had like a thorn in her paw. It was like nothing major, but she had to go to the vet. And so I thought, well, I'll just put Kevin in her bed, because I've taken them all down now, but I had very large kennels, and they were like rooms, like the big kennels, so that the girls had space to move around, but because they're Jack Russells, they can be a little mischievous and do a little bit of destruction, if truth be told. And so I thought, well, okay, well, you know, I can leave Kevin in her bed and I'll take Bobby to the vet. Well, heaven forbid I do that. I got home and poor Kevin had lost herself in her bed, and there was poop everywhere. She puked everywhere. You could tell obviously that she'd thrown her body at the cage more than once. She was not okay at all. And I vowed I will never leave her alone in a cage. I'll never leave her alone in my house again. But I wonder about people that have been with their dogs and their cats and their animals. And then suddenly they find themselves at 70 years old or 80 years old, or even younger, having to go to the doctor for a procedure that's longer than 24 hours. You know, their dog's probably not used to being without their owner, and B, the trauma that goes with that for the senior who's going in worried about their animal. Like, have you experienced that, you know, in your role with Elder Dog?
Yeah, certainly it's a very tough situation, and a layer to it that people often don't appreciate is that many seniors don't want to ask for help, because the response that they get, say if they call their children or a neighbor and say, look, I have to go into hospital for this procedure, could you please take my dog for 2 or 3 nights? The response they'll get is, well, you see, I told you, you know, you should have given him up for adoption a long time ago. You know, Mom, you can't take care of him anymore, your health. And so they know if they reach out for help, the response they get is quite critical or judgmental. It's used as proof that you're no longer capable of providing a loving home, when in fact, they are capable of providing a loving home 360 days a year. And all they need is some support for the other time. And so that's where Elder Dog can step in and say, don't worry about it. We're not judging you. We want to keep you as a family. We're not telling you to give up the dog. We're saying, what can we do to make sure that the relationship continues to work for you and for your pet?
Yeah, you make such an important point. It is very true. I have heard those accolades from family members that have said, or accolade is the wrong word, because that's more of a celebration. It's not a celebration at all when, you know, a daughter or a son is saying, look, Mom, Dad, you shouldn't be doing this any longer. Yeah. And yet at the same time, what they may not understand is that relationship that they have might be the only relationship that they have for 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, right? Yeah. And so, you know, where daughter and son will maybe make a phone call, that's great. They may not physically be able to see their mom and dad. And so that level of company, I mean, I know for myself, even now, again, specifically because I've just lost Bobby, Kevin and our house is different. It is the climate and it is completely different. I cannot imagine a senior having to let go of their dog. And then what? I mean, the grief for one, but for two, the loneliness factor.
Yeah. And, you know, loneliness is deadly. Loneliness is fatal. It's an enormous stressor, and it's particularly acute, as you've pointed out, with seniors, you know, whose ability to, you know, once mobility restrictions and so on set in on top of COVID, you know, you put it very eloquently in suggesting that their pet is the sole contact they have with another living creature on any sustained basis. And that makes the bond all that much more essential to their well-being. It's not a a question of a luxury or a frivolity. It's essential.
And it's the caregiving. I mean, I think that older adults, there's a purpose. I mean, I know with Kevin, she reminds me, I have to eat now. I have to pee now. I have to do this now. I have to do that now. Just by the basis of her being the dog, she makes me get up out of my chair, right? And so I would imagine that for older adults, there's so much more to this picture.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on another incredible aspect of it is that it's a dependent relationship. It works both ways, but having a living creature that's dependent on you is really life affirming. It gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of self-worth. And often an outsider only sees that as a burden. Mom, you've got so much on your plate with your health and your pills, your doctor appointments, you shouldn't have to take care of Rover anymore. When taking care of Rover is what makes her day worth living. It's what, it's the reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, it really, I've seen it so often, and the real challenge that I see, and thankfully, this philosophy is changing, but for a long time when people had to transition out of their own home and would go into residential care and independent living, you couldn't bring your dog with you.
Yeah. And that's still, a huge burden. I mean, I think one of the many things COVID has shown us is that we're not as age friendly yet as we think we are. And obviously it's shown us that in very dramatic ways in terms of obviously the fatalities that have occurred in residential care. But in a more general sense, it just shows us that so much of what we've done with seniors is focused on what they can't do. So when a senior can no longer cook or clean or remember to take their pills, that becomes the focus of structuring their life. And so we place them in an institutional setting where these things are done for them. And when a senior can no longer walk a dog or take it to the vet, we take the dog from them and reassure them it's best for them and it's best for the dog, rather than changing the focus to what seniors can do. And, in terms of housing, I mean, the Scandinavian model, as opposed to large residential care homes, is a small home environment where you have 6 or 8 or 10 seniors with on-site staff, and there's a shared kitchen. And if all they can do is chop the carrots, that's what they do. But they remain a part of that sort of family unit, and the focus is on what they can do. Yeah. And so with Elder Dog, we focus on what the seniors can do. They can still provide love. They can still provide companionship. They can still provide a warm home environment, as long as we put in place certain supports to assist them in areas they can't. And so really, to become an age-friendly community, the focus has to change in a real global sense, from structuring everything around what they can no longer do to honoring and supporting them in what they can do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think asset-based philosophy goes so much further, right? As a community, our strength is in what it is that we can do versus what we can't do. And in this day and age, what we can't do can easily be augmented by bringing supports in. We certainly have a lot of supports available from home and community care. We certainly have a lot of supports that are available through things like Better at Home and through other like-minded sort of organizational processes that help people stay in their home a little bit longer. We now have, safe senior strong communities where people can get their groceries and all of that. It is a logical step forward to make sure that we have someone available to support pets.
Yeah,
right. It's an extension, right, of the family in so many levels. So how did you said Elder Dog here, the chapter that we have in Nanaimo, just started in May of 2020. Can you tell me a little bit about how that all kind of transpired? How did Elder Dog become so important in Nanaimo? And by the way, gratefully so. Tell us a little bit about its inception.
Well, Elder Dog Canada has been around since 2009, and it was founded by a woman named Ardra Cole, who was a university professor, and she had a background in educational psychology and teaching. And when her older brother died, she became the parent to two of his dogs, and they were senior dogs. And it opened up a new universe for her. So to make a long story short, she became very interested in the connection between seniors and senior dogs and what have you. And Elder Dog grew out of that, the idea that to maintain that bond was essential, and to do so required this group of dedicated volunteers. And in terms of Nanaimo, my personal involvement was I was out at the Coco Cafe one day having lunch back in the days when you could do that. Yeah, no and kidding. There was a poster up advertising Elder Dog that they were looking for volunteers in this area. And so both my husband and I, being dog lovers, got in touch with Elder Dog. And there was a core group, I think back then, of maybe 6 or 7 of us who had volunteered at the same time. And we just sort of formed an executive and took all the steps necessary, started recruiting volunteers. And it's grown since then, despite the challenges that COVID obviously, creates in terms of getting the word out and being able to grow a community-based organization.
Yeah. Well, the need is so significant. There's no doubt about it. There is such a critical need for people to support pets in their homes. I have a question for you regarding the volunteer aspect that you spoke of just a minute ago. Volunteering, first of all, God bless the volunteers. God bless the volunteers, because really, we are so blessed in Nanaimo in that there are a number of different organizations that are out there that require volunteers. But when it comes to finding them and sourcing out volunteers, it's becoming slim pickings because there's so many people. Are you finding it difficult to get volunteers at this time, or are people coming forward pretty significantly? And how does one become a volunteer on top of it?
Yeah, certainly at the outset, volunteer recruitment went fairly well because it's kind of a unique placement where you're combining the love of a dog with some degree of physical capacity. If you're going to be walking animals and carrying large bags of food and so on. And so it took a particular kind of volunteer. And so in that sense, it's great because you can sort of be more targeted than if you're just looking for someone to man an office position, say. And so the volunteers came pretty quickly, and it's a process. Basically, there's of course an application that has to be filled out. All of the volunteers are screened, have criminal record checks because they're dealing with vulnerable people.
Absolutely.
And eventually, upon completion of the process, they get ID tags and so on. And so it takes a while from the step of, yes, I want to be a volunteer, to now I'm fully on board and can start delivering these services. I think it was harder for us to find clients to get the word out to seniors because this was all occurring at a time when facilities were going into lockdown mode. And so it just happened that by circumstance, all of this was going on against the backdrop of the start of the COVID pandemic. So that has been and remains to a certain extent a challenge. While we've certainly, we're walking dogs, we're fostering dogs, we've rehomed dogs, we've been busy in this period of time. It does trouble me that I know that there are more people out there who could use our services, and it's just been a real challenge to get the word out.
Well, for those of you that are listening, perfect segue time. This is Cathy Holmes on CHLY 101.7 FM right here in gorgeous Nanaimo. You're listening to Act 3. My guest, Sharon Speevak, Elder Dogs. You want to volunteer. You need the service, right? So let's just say there's a double banger here. So in a few minutes, because this is what I do around the middle of the show, Sharon, is we tell people to go grab a piece of paper and a pen so that they can reach out to you when the program ends, and certainly follow up with you for any potential services that you may be able to offer.
Absolutely.
So listen, when it comes to speaking of that, I mean, how from an older adult's perspective, if I'm an older adult, which I am, at least I feel like it. How hard is it, the process? So let's say that, for example, we'll just use Kevin. Well, we're not going to, but we'll just use Kevin for the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that I have to go to the hospital next week, or you know, as early as Wednesday next week, for example. Okay, I don't, but for example, if I called Elder Dog Canada or Elder Dog Nanaimo, what's the process of me having a volunteer available to come and support looking after Kevin for a day or two, or whatever the case may be? How does that work?
So the main point of contact is Elder Dog Canada. And so you can phone them, you can email them, what have you. Obviously, in a case that's urgent, the person, you know, you would be likely to call them. And they would ask you a few preliminary questions just to confirm your geographic region, confirm that you qualify for the service, which basically means you're 55 years and older, so on. And then they immediately refer it to us. And we have coordinators of all the different services. So if it was a dog walking, it would go to the Nanaimo coordinator of dog walking. If it is a temporary foster, it goes to, we have two women who are sharing the heading up of the foster. And it would be processed on an urgent basis. And we haven't turned anybody down so far, and it's not our intention to. We have a roster of approved foster homes that, again, have been screened. They've all been checked and rechecked, and you would get a response within 24 hours.
Oh, that's fantastic. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in and you need support to help you with your dog and you're over the age of 55, Sharon, how do people reach you at Elder Dog?
So they can reach us in a number of different ways. They can call the national office, which is an 800 number. It's 1-855-336-4226. As well, elderdog.ca, pretty simple. We'll take you to the national Elder Dog page, which has all sorts of information about services, has the volunteer application form. And we also have a Facebook page that's just for our Nanaimo branch. So Nanaimo Elder Dog on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with what's been going on this week and in the past, and see what's happening on a more local level.
That's amazing. We're going to send that information out again a little bit later. You piqued my interest and my curiosity regarding foster homes. How often and for how long do we find foster homes are necessary for older adults in our community so far?
Yeah, it's been a real range. I mean, we've done everything from providing just an overnight for a senior who was going in for a relatively simple operative procedure, but just required to stay overnight for observation, to fostering that's more long-term. We have had senior families approach us as well, where the senior has passed away, and we've gone into a foster situation as a precursor to rehoming, because one of the things that Elder Dog does do is specialize in the rehoming of senior dogs, because it's very hard on a senior dog in the event they have to be rehomed to go through the normal channels, to go through the SPCA or Humane Society, because, you know, they're competing with younger dogs. They're competing with dogs who are sometimes don't have the health issues. So we can target people who are really interested in taking a senior dog on and everything that means. And sometimes that means that the dog can be fostered for quite a while, can be fostered for 3 or 4 weeks until the rehoming process is completed. and often during that period will take advantage of that time to get the dog some of the perhaps veterinary services that it hasn't been able to avail itself of, or socialize the dog more, because as the senior was becoming more ill, their life became more secluded. And so often the dogs lose those socialization skills. And so fostering is both providing a safe home, but it's also helping the dog to transition to a new family.
Yeah, I feel that would be such an important piece, because especially if the dog is an older dog, it's been used to a very specific lifestyle, a very specific rhythm in the home. And so when that rhythm changes due to death, I wonder how these dogs manage walking ahead, especially if they're dogs that are often quite unwell. Is there funding that comes to you in any particular way, or how especially if you're dealing with fostering after a person has passed away, who cares for the feeding and the support and the all the stuff that happens with being able to look after the situation?
Yeah. Well, certainly, the primary expectation is, and usually is met, is that the remaining family, are so grateful that there's an organization that can take this on when there isn't a child or someone who can bring the dog into their home. And so they're willing to assist if there's veterinary treatment that's required, dog food, that sort of thing. But in the event that there is a financial need, yes, there is funding available. And so the care will be received. Absolutely.
So do you apply for grants, or do you have a call out for donations? Like if somebody wanted to donate to Elder Dog to help support food or, fostering or what have you, particularly in the case where there is maybe even no family,
right.
What does that look like?
Yeah, like any nonprofit organization, we depend upon, the generosity of the community. And so certainly on the Elder Dog main website, there's opportunities to donate, both one-time or monthly donations. We run fundraisers from time to time. Again, it's been a little difficult with COVID, but for example, we have a 50-50 draw that we're going to be launching in June.
Tell us more.
Well, we're waiting on licensing and so on, but yes, but it will be a major fundraiser, and certainly we'll have lots of information about that in the local, newspapers and so on. But it's always a challenge, but we have a lot of support, nationwide for the organization. And, it's, as I said, it's been in existence since 2009. And so it's proven its worth, and, has established itself in so many communities. I mean, there are branches in 8 provinces.
How many on Vancouver Island?
On Vancouver Island, we have in Victoria, Comox, and Nanaimo. So we're pretty well covered, because Nanaimo we have clients from Ladysmith all the way up to Qualicum, and the Comox area will cover, of course, Courtenay, Comox, all the way up as far as the Port Hardy region. And the Victoria branch has agreed basically to take everything south of Ladysmith. So we don't turn anyone down. If we get a phone call from someone who's in Port Hardy or a senior in Campbell River, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And it costs nothing for the senior, right? Is it how it works?
There's absolutely no charge involved. It's all volunteer.
To me, that's incredible. Tell everybody once again how they can reach you.
So they can go on the national website, which is simply elderdog.ca. They can call the national office to volunteer, or if they need services, and that's 1-855-336-4226. And they can also visit the Nanaimo chapter's Facebook page.
And so on the Nanaimo chapter's Facebook page, it just says Nanaimo Elder Dog or Elder Dog Nanaimo, or just type Elder Dog and away it comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's marvelous. I'm curious because I always wonder how people get themselves involved in this. Like you talked about being at the Cocoa Cafe and you saw a sign,
Yeah.
but there must have been like some kind of a little trigger for you as well that said, hey, have you lost a dog in your life, or have you found an experience where you just wanted to care? What brought you to be more passionate about this than, volunteering in any other kind of an organization?
Well, I have a dog now, but she's 7 months old.
Oh, she's a
But
baby.
yeah, she's a little baby. But I did have a dog for 16 years. Her name was Chelsea. And so, as I said, just having had Chelsea and realizing the incredible bond that did exist with her, and being part of the family, it made me immediately drawn to any organization that is involved with caring for dogs in particular, but pets generally. And the flip side of that is that I'm also a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Society.
Yes.
Here in Nanaimo. I up until COVID anyhow facilitated caregiver support groups, and I also deliver educational workshops. And so I sort of see it from the other side as well. I'm very engaged in creating not only a pet-friendly community, but an age-friendly community. And while the focus has been more on the dementia aspect, dementia-friendly, it's seniors in general. It's just doing what's needed to be done to honor and support them and empower them to live the very best life they can live until the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious about some of the dogs that you have. Have you fostered any of the dogs for your as well, or has that been something that some of your colleagues have done?
The fostering is something some of my colleagues have been doing. I walk a dog. I've been walking a dog now, a little Havanese fella named Pippa basically for over a year now. Yeah. And he and I have a great relationship. It started off where Pippa wasn't used to leaving mom behind. Yeah. And so, very resistant to walking, which is a common experience, I think, for all of our volunteers. But you just go at it very slowly, and you make sure to bring only the very best of treats, because bribery is the main method we use.
It's true.
But it's great. I mean, Pippa now, he just loves his walks. It's the difference is night and day. And, the interesting thing was, I think I had been doing this for about 4 or 5 months, and Pippa's owner lives in a sort of townhouse complex. Yeah. And so I would go walking in and out of the complex into the more general community. I was coming back one day, and one of the owner's neighbors was out working in his lawn, and he says hello to me. And I said hello to him a number of times before, but this time he said, your service makes all the difference in the world. He said, Pippa, before any time would walk by, would snarl at me, was just very sort of unfriendly to the residents here. And now that he's used to having, a number of different people coming and walking him and engaging and so on, when the owner would take Pippa out, always wanting to say hello to everyone and so on. So it was wonderful to get feedback from someone who wasn't directly involved in the process, yes, who was just sort of an outsider observing it and saying, even for me, my experience has been changed as a result of this service, where I now have this wonderful little dog who wants to come up and say hello to me when it goes out walking.
I always wonder, and partially because Kevin is very skittish. She's always afraid of other dogs. Bobby Wilson, I could take her for a walk. She'd want to meet everybody, play with everybody, check everybody out, all good. But Kevin has never been that way. She has always been very afraid. And now she's half blind, and now her little body, I mean, she's got a lot of energy, don't get me wrong. She's doesn't let anything, hold her back. But I mean, really, she's quite afraid. As a walker, have you found any tricks along the way that have helped these more challenged dogs, or is it just repetition?
Certainly it's a lot of repetition, and it's also just being incredibly patient and working very slowly. And so, if the first day of a walk is simply taking 2 steps away from the front door and sitting down on a little bench and just sitting there.
Yeah.
And, that's a huge step. It looks tiny to us, but from the perspective of the dog, that's a huge step. And so you just very slowly go out into the community and don't force any relationships. A lot is just sitting and watching at a safe distance. And the dog will tell you when the distance isn't safe anymore. It either body language or barking or starting to growl. And then you just take 1 step back. And over time, you can increase the degree of contact, but it takes time and it takes patience. But most dogs will come around.
And I find that, certainly in Kevin's case, it's afraid, right? Even we go out to the park. And the funny thing is I laugh at people all the time especially when I used to walk both of them at the park every day. Right, I live right in, the most beautiful part of the world in Nanaimo. We've got an abundance of parks everywhere. And so, especially on beautiful days, sunny days, summer days, in the car and away we go. That's just part of what we did. But it didn't matter. It would be like, they'd never been walked a day in their life, right? They're 12 years old. They've never been walked a day in their life, right?
What's a leash? Yeah.
Right? Like, what's a leash? And why can't I go over to that giant pit bull and just say hi? Like, or I'm going to bark and bark and bark and actually create some aggression on the other side. But I don't want to fight you. I'm just, my tail's between my legs and you're just freaking the crap out of me. And yet I know that dogs know they are great for leaders, for leadership, right? They have a tremendous sense, and we can learn so much from them. What did your 16-year-old dog teach you?
Oh my gosh, she taught me basically that the highs and the lows of the relationship are equally important. That in the end, the bond that's created when you go through the very worst and the very best with another living being is what makes that relationship rewarding and whole. Yeah. And I think after that, I just became much more appreciative of the relationship, even during the worst of times or the best of times. Just recognizing that it's all part of the process,
Yeah. And when you're with Peppa and your 6-month-old dog, how's that relationship working?
Well, Pippa hasn't met my 6-month-old.
Oh,
so,
you haven't done
no, we're not walking them together. I think Pippa wants all my attention for now. Whether eventually they'll walk together, who knows? But Pippa deserves all my attention at this stage.
Yes, I understand entirely. But I do want to know more about your 6-month-old. What kind of a pup is she?
She's a cockapoo. And so a Cocker Spaniel crossed with a poodle, although she's predominantly Spaniel. I like to describe it. She's 90% Spaniel and 10% brains. But... And she's actually not a COVID puppy because we had decided before COVID that we were finally ready to welcome another dog into our lives. But we were on a wait list and what have you. And so it just worked out that she came to us in September of last year. But she's delightful. She's we're in puppyhood, so it takes a lot of energy and patience and everything else. But no, I'm looking forward to many, many years of joy with her.
Oh, no doubt. I would have just even imagined that the short time that you've had her already has just been such a different climate in your home.
Absolutely. So we should swap stories, though. So I'll tell you that my dog's name is Abby because my husband and my favorite record, which will date us, just saying record, was Abbey Road by the Beatles. And so hence we called her Abby, but I am dying to know where Bobby Wilson comes from.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you asked. We had a tradition in my family. I was married for a long time. My husband and I divorced about 10 or 11 years ago, actually just before Bobby Wilson and Kevin came into our lives. And we had 2 other dogs. So and I had talked about offline, we talked about my other Jack Russell who had been killed by a coyote. So what had happened was we had an acreage, and we've always thought it would be hilarious if we were out walking the dogs, and if the dog got off, we would shout out their name like Steven, right? The shot. And so I always loved the name Bobby. So I was like imagining Bobby, Bobby. And my son was like, no way, Mom. And that was right at the time Tom Hanks's movie came out, and Wilson passed away, and Wilson was the soccer ball, and he wanted Wilson.
Oh my.
So he's like, no, Mom, I don't want Bobby. Bobby's a silly name. That's not a good name. We don't want that. And he kept saying, and he was a younger lad. And he was like, no, Mom, we really need to have the name Wilson. And so my husband at the time said, well, in all fairness, why don't you have them both? Bobby Wilson is kind of a cool name. Can you imagine? Bobby Wilson, Bobby Wilson. And then it became Bobby Wilson, Bobby Wilson, Bobby Wilson, Bobby Wilson. And so we had a little song going. So as I said, I had 2 other dogs at the time. So Stephen and Mr. Potson. When Bobby Wilson came in, Mr. Potson was the only male dog that I had. And in my whole life. And he was like, you've got to be kidding me to bring this little runt of a dog. How dare you bring this dog? And the reason we brought her in was because when Buckley had died, we wanted to have the energy again. It was the energy, right? The house was just different. So Stephen was an older dog by then. And so and a Shepherd Heeler cross. And so she was like, this little dog is too tiny. I'm going to step on her. I'm going to squish her. And so we thought, okay. So we went back to the website where we got Bobby Wilson from. She's an Oklahoma dog. And we got her sister. So it's the same. Kevin is her sister.
Oh, okay.
By 2 different moms, same dad.
Yes.
And where Kevin came from is Dakota said, well, you won with the Bobby piece. The next dog, girl or boy, I don't care. Kevin. So then Kevin arrived, and she was the prissiest little dog you ever saw in your life. There was nothing masculine about her. She's still very, very prissy. She is very girl dog. There's nothing masculine about Kevin at all. She is a girly girl. So the name doesn't fit her at all. And it's hilarious because of that. So that's why it was Bobby Wilson and Kevin. Long story, but I hope that it's amusing people. It's certainly.
I can't imagine it doing anything other than amuse them.
I've had so many people say, well, there seems to be a problem with the way you have sex, the sex of your dogs. Like, why they're girl dogs with boys' names? Like, what's up with that? And I keep referring back to my family was just weird.
Yeah. That is the conclusion to be drawn.
It is the only conclusion that can be drawn, is that they were just weird. But it's been that way always. And I don't know if I ever get, and I really, and I can say this publicly, I love what Elder Dogs does. I love what you've talked about today.
Thank you.
I am nervous about volunteering in the sense of knowing how Kevin behaves with other dogs, and I don't want her to be hurt. And I want to share this out loud, and I know it's probably, I'm supposed to be interviewing you and not the other way around. So forgive me that I feel like I've monopolized the story about Wilson a little bit, but it's part of the healing when you lose a dog too, I think. And I'm blessed that I get to have this radio show, that I get to share this out loud, because I know that we've lost, all of us in community at one time or another have lost something that we've loved, if not a pet person. And so what I just feel very honored by, and I felt honored by the same thing with Stephen, Buckley, Mr. Potson, all of my dogs, is I've had the great honor of having them die in my arms, looking in their eyes and being with them and knowing where they were. And I just think that it's such a huge gift. And I think that the mourning process, you know, when people make the assumption that at the top of the hour, we talked about family, you know, saying this is a bit of a burden. If to take that dog away from someone who's otherwise capacitated is cruel, especially if that dog has been with. I mean, I've always believed that if you bring a dog into your life, unless barring absolutely something beyond your control, you take that dog on as a life partner. That dog becomes part of the fabric of the rest of that dog's life in your care. Now, it's true that doesn't always work. Some people have to pass their dogs forward for any number of reasons, and I'm no judge of what those reasons are. It's not my intent to say that what somebody does is right or wrong, but my belief is that we have that animal for as long as we can. And when that's not possible, to be able to have an organization that can help foster or facilitate. I mean, you must also in this process deal with the grief of older adults who have had to lose their dog, or because that dog may have been in your care for a while and have had health risks, the grief that will go with fostering or taking care of or supporting that family who's lost a dog. I mean, that's a huge part of it too, isn't it?
It is. And certainly, you know, the process of rehoming a dog where the senior is still alive, where they've simply concluded that they cannot, as you say, sustain the relationship any further. You're caring for both the dog in the sort of more practical aspects of the rehoming, but you're also helping the senior to transition. You know, and there is a lot of grief involved. We like to think, we believe that the fact that, you know, they continue to deal with the same organization, you know, if we've been walking the dog, we've been caring for the dog, and then have to transition, there's a level of trust there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the most important thing is they know that that dog is going to a loving home. And that the dog is going to live out the rest of its years, getting the very best life that he or she can have. And, you know, often if the new owners agree, you know, the communication can be there. We're not secretive about things beyond what's required, you know, to make it work. But you know, they'll get photographs and letters and things that talk about it. And often, you know, that when they've come to the point of resigning themselves to let go, it's a real joy for them to just see, you know, their dog out in the backyard running around and chasing a ball and so on, and knowing that they had a role in creating that. Because again, you know, they're still capable of having a say. You can go through the applications with them and involve them in that process of selection so that they understand that they're still a caregiver. They're still taking care of that dog. They're doing it in a way that's at a distance, but they're still participating.
Well, I would imagine, especially people that have to go into residential care facility. We did talk a little bit, we touched on it very, very briefly in the middle of the hour, but I mean, I still think about those moments. I still, you know, I was a better at home coordinator in Nanaimo for 6 years, and what before moving on to doing provincial better at home expansion. And what I noticed so often was when people would have to leave their home, it's no longer a capacity issue where they are safe and they have to transition into residential care. And those people, I had one instance where the woman wanted to put her dog down. Now, this is several years ago. She had a small Chihuahua, and she wanted to put the dog down because the dog couldn't stay with her. She was 14 or 15 years old as it was. She had been used to having her chicken boiled, you know, having water that had been boiled. Like everything had to have been done a certain way for this Chihuahua. And that older adult really felt very, very much that that would be the way the dog would live. And the idea of anybody else taking her dog was not accepted,
Yeah.
right? And so the discussion came up to put the dog down, which, you know, for all intent purposes, the woman actually passed away prior to that happening. And things, you know, things by the grace of God or whatever, the nature of things, things worked out in that situation. But nonetheless, it comes up so regularly where people have to move into residential care and then they have to say goodbye to their dog. And that severing is so hard for so many. And then that they go to the SPCA or they go somewhere else and the dog ends up being put down, or because it's an older dog. You know, I'm flailing here just a little bit because I've seen it happen so many times with the unknowns, right? There's so many unknowns. So knowing that that doesn't have to happen is incredible. And knowing that if I have a person who's going into residential care and they have to say goodbye to their dog, that there is a process for which they can still be involved, still get letters, cards, what have you. I mean, I think that still creates a quality of life, not only for the older adult, but for the family, that new bond that comes with the family that comes on board to care for their dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's where the ability to place the dog in a foster situation where you can say to a senior who, you know, who's coming from a place of love in saying, I really think it's best to put, you know, the dog down because the dog's going to be miserable with anyone else. And I couldn't live with that. I mean, how do I sleep at night?
Exactly.
And so on. And so you can say to that senior, because of the services and that we're able to offer, is to say, well, let's do this. Let's place him in foster care and you do the move and so on. You're still the owner of that dog. You still have the legal right to make that decision on down the line. But let's see how he adapts. Give us 3 weeks. And let's see what sort of changes happen. And if at the end of the 3 weeks you still feel the same way, we can either extend that or, you know, we'll revisit it. Let's do it one step at a time. And so it's not an either or. There can be a transition there where, again, the owner remains involved, and we have an opportunity to show her that, it's going to be a difficult transition, no question about it, but it's not insurmountable. With a lot of love all around, we can work and make this work for both of you, that you both go on to just another phase of your life and you still stay in the picture. You still, as you've said, you know, we'll have contact and know how your dog is doing. And so we can kind of transition that decision-making process and say, let's just take it one step at a time and let's see. And you know, we trust enough in that process that in the 3 weeks time or whatever, there'll be enough change that the senior will go, well, look, you know, isn't that interesting? You know?
And often I bet are surprised at just how wonderful that transition can be.
Yeah.
We're at the end of our time pretty much. My favorite part of the program here. My favorite, well, actually, I have to say this whole program for me has been my favorite part of the program. I'm honored, Sharon, to have been able to share this time with you, and I'm so grateful. So grateful for your warmth, your kindness, your comfort during the loss of my Bobby Wilson. I'm very grateful. Thank you. And as we go out of the show, my favorite part, as I said, is to find out the wisdom. What's the life lesson? What's the takeaway? If you could imbibe on our fantastic community the wisdom that you've learned through all of this, what might that look like?
I think it's that if we want to be a welcoming, supportive community to seniors, that we have to view their animal companions as an essential part of their lives. We just have to change our mindset, and it's not, let's get rid of the TV, mom, or the microwave is confusing you, let's unplug it. Or you're going to burn yourself on the stove. This is not a relationship that can be unplugged. This is not a relationship that can be removed. We have to view this as an essential part of seniors' well-being and put in place everything that's necessary to support that ongoing bond.
breathing that whole thing in and screaming hallelujah. That to
Yeah,
me is
you got it, sister.
probably the wisest thing I've heard. I really do. You're right. To be an age-friendly community, we need to step up our game a lot.
Yeah.
So how do people reach you one more time, my friend?
Absolutely. So they can visit the website, elderdog.ca. They can call 1-855-336-4226. And please come and visit us and like us on our Facebook page for the Nanaimo Elder Dogs.
Absolutely. And I like this incredibly great advice. Thank you so much once again, Sharon, for joining us today on Act 3. We're really, really glad you did. If you want to actually know a little bit more about this, please make sure that you do tune into elderdogs.ca and find out how you can become a part of such an incredible organization. And you might want to watch Sharon on Act 3. If you tune into our television show on Shaw Spotlight, you can see a wonderful interview between Teresa Osman, also a host on CHLY 101.7 on Wellness Wednesdays. So definitely tune in and check out Sharon Speevak on these different platforms, because you'll be glad that you did. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Act 3.